Good morning. Welcome back. Happy Thursday. For those of you, I keep saying good morning, and it's like, I don't know where you live. But this morning,
it's morning for us.
I don't know their life.
And only us.
And only us.
And Hawaii.
Today we're going to be talking about some good Picard. We're going to be talking about Captain Marvel 2 and the MCU. We're talking the Netflix metrics. There we go. And, drum roll please, we have got ourselves a movie fight. Dan and Eric will battle it out to decide something I will not, because we're trying to keep it quiet. So stay tuned in. I'm very excited for this. Segment 1, Picard Episode 1. We're going to be talking about this reaction. This was via CBS All Access. And if you haven't already gotten your free 1-week trial, you can definitely do that if you want to check out the show, because I know there's a lot of these. So Star Trek Picard premiered early this morning. It was midnight here. And we are here to react to this. So for the first couple of minutes, we're just going to talk our straight up reactions, what we thought about it. And then when we're going to spoil, I will give y'all a warning, and then we will start spoiling for a little bit. We're not going to do too much because we love you. We want you to see things that are shows. So firstly, we've all gotten a chance to watch it. Dan, yes. I have to know your thoughts.
I like The Mandalorian, but this is my Mandalorian. As far as, and I've been very skeptical of this because, for me, TNG is my favorite Trek. Yeah. Will always be my favorite Trek. I love Trek in general, but TNG is the one that I just love unabashedly. So when they said they're doing Picard, I was like, oh, yay, but also oh man. So far, so good for me. First of all, Patrick Stewart, no surprise here, totally rocks. He's a great actor, and I haven't read a lot of reaction. I'm sure that there are a lot of people that don't like, perhaps necessarily, and we'll talk about it, where they've taken Starfleet, where they've taken his character. I think it's an interesting direction for the character. I like that because that first scene, I thought they were data baiting us. That Data was going to be in one scene, and then it's oh, they just wanted something to put in the trailer. But no, I like. Well, again, I don't want to get into spoilers, but I like how they're weaving that in, and they're also weaving in a lot of post Trek TNG prime timeline events, if that makes any sense. But the idea of Picard being a key figure in the Romulan disaster, the sun going supernova, which resulted in the destruction of Romulus, which is the inciting incident for the Kelvin timeline for the Abrams verse.
Yeah, these are not spoilers. This is lore.
Right, where Spock Prime, he was working to help stop that, and that's what sent him into that alternate timeline. I like that they're folding that in and bringing that in as part of the in-universe things. They're bringing that section in. There's they were going deep cut into Star Trek Nemesis references, which I'm whoa! Did not expect a B4 shout out and all this stuff. So there's some things that I'm not sold on. I mean, it looks very current TV-y, which is very high gloss. Not a lot of. It's just a very TV kind of look, which I guess shouldn't be surprising. But there's the things that I'm still not sold on, but some things that I'm very intrigued by. It intrigued me, which I liked and perhaps didn't expect. It brought up a lot of things that we'll talk about that I'm very intrigued by. I'm intrigued about where they're going to go. And really, Patrick Stewart, he's so good, but he just really... For a while, I was I don't know, does this feel like Picard? But as it went on, they explain why he feels this certain way, and it tracked for me thus far.
Hard same. Eric, your thoughts?
So I should probably explain I'm a mid-level Trek fan. I've seen all of original series, Next Gen, and the movies, but I've not seen Voyager and Enterprise. I'm very, very slowly watching Deep Space Nine right now.
Get into it. It's my favorite.
My wife, by the way, Next Gen is probably one of her all-time favorite shows, and I really liked it too when I watched it all with her. All that being said, I really liked this premiere. I thought it was really good. It's interesting because it's the first Trek show based around a single character. Obviously, yes, other shows had the obvious lead or leads, but because it was the crew. But here it's Picard, his name is in the title, but obviously we know that both the character and the actor has the gravitas to hold that.
Right.
And I was surprised by how emotional I was in the opening, just being Patrick Stewart is playing Picard again, just realizing I'm watching, even with that, I won't say exactly what, but you mentioned a little of the data stuff they showed, but it's just seeing that and just seeing him it was a comfortable pair of shoes. I thought he slipped right back into it. I understand that it's going to, why some people won't love all the things they've done with Starfleet, but I think it's intriguing also because people have been wondering for so long, when are they going to do Trek that takes place after Next Gen?
Right.
So I do think that's cool that we're finally getting the future of this future. And I also like, before we go into spoiler stuff, I'll just say also I like that they're doing the thing. Other shows have been doing this recently, but I think it is a benefit of this era of streaming era, of just the way people watch TV, that they're slowly introducing the supporting cast. There are people we did not meet at all that we know are main characters on this show. But they can do that. It's like, hey, we care about Jean-Luc. We're going to see his journey, and we don't have to have a pilot anymore be like, and this is the show. At the end of the episode, they can take the time, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, because when they've earned the trust of the fans, and they know it's something people want to watch. I loved this unabashedly. I watched it, and then I got up early this morning to watch it. This hit all of the Star Trek I need. And yeah, there are things that are going to feel a little bit different, but you can tell and kind of see where it's going. And this was just, and yeah, of course it looks amazing. Money was spent. Yeah. It looks awesome. And so it is also, it's nice to see, in a way that makes sense because technology keeps moving as it's going. It's nice to see, maybe a slightly glossier, what would it look like, 20 years into the future if you take these characters on a long enough timeline. So everything else I have to say is basically spoilery. So let's go ahead and get into that. We are getting into the spoiler stuff. Before I do, I just want to say one last thing. He went on The View. Yes. And he invited Whoopi on The View. It was so cute. Yeah. To be on season 2, he was like, all of us from the show, we all would like to invite you to come and be on Picard season 2. I cried real big. It was real great. And so and again, that's not a spoiler. If you haven't seen that clip, after you're done watching the show, go watch that clip. It is on Twitter, and it is so great. She smiles for like minutes. It's amazing. All right, spoiler time. Yeah. Blah-dow.
Engage.
All right, so now we are fully into spoilers, and I will probably keep saying that in case people keep coming in. Oh my! Okay, first of all, hot Romulans, man.
Wow. All right, let's lead off with hot Romulans.
You know who I am. You knew who I was before
I shouldn't have been surprised.
But yeah, I like this is people talk a lot, and in some ways I agree, in some ways I don't, about how there are the two Picards. There's like the movie Picard, and then there is the show Picard, and obviously when you take a character that we've known for seasons and then you have to kind of put him into 2 hours, and for a movie-going audience, some things get flattened, some things get heightened. For me, for some people, they find it to be a really bad thing. For me, it's just a different thing. If you are a fan of show Picard, this is your dude.
Yes, but also I think what tracks is he was always willing to stand up to Starfleet, and when he felt that Starfleet was betraying its core values, he would disobey orders. He would do things that would get him court-martialed. He would do anything really to protect the core values of Starfleet. So that tracks for me, that if Starfleet is doing things that he feels are against the mission, I think that he would, if he felt that the core values of what Starfleet is were being compromised, and obviously this is where they have him in this show.
Yeah. Well, and also look at the way that he quit. It wasn't like, yes, he quit and he was really, really bummed out, but at the same time, he's also taken in these refugees into his home. You know what I mean? So it's still doing the very basic Picard stuff. Someone shows up on his on his vineyard and is like, I need your help, and he's like, go to sleep, go, we got this. We'll talk in the morning. That is Picard stuff.
And also they made sure that it was like the events that led to him quitting were sort of double cataclysmic. It's like what happened to the Romulans, but then what happened on Mars.
And then Starfleet letting down everyone.
Right. So it wasn't like it doesn't sound like he made this flippant decision. It's like huge things happened for the entire galaxy and that he was personally involved in, and that touched him personally because obviously his love of data is a major theme here, and what it means that they've sort of turned on all androids. So I really thought that they justified that decision of his.
Especially, I want to say, during that interview, just that moment where I was like, okay, this is exactly like my dude, is when the interviewer starts grilling him for what was clearly supposed to be, he thought a puff piece, and is like, oh, you did this to save, Romulan lives, and he's like, no, just lives. And that was the moment I was like, yep.
That's Picard.
That's
Captain Picard. And also, get ready, Ryan, mass tune-out coming out. But it makes sense in the Star Trek continuity, because chronologically this was a situation that Starfleet had been in before. If you go back to Star Trek VI with the explosion of Praxis, they were in a situation where there's this catastrophic disaster in the Klingon Empire, and they basically said, like, if we don't do anything, the Klingon Empire is going to be dead within 20 years. And they were the biggest, or however many years, and they were like the biggest enemies in Starfleet. And Captain Kirk said, let them die. And it turns out that through much tribulation that, like, not doing that by Starfleet helping their greatest enemy led to a breaking down of the tensions between the Klingons. Then they became allies, and it basically, and so to see basically Starfleet being put in this position again, you know, approximately 100 or so-ish years later, 80-something years later, and to have their greatest enemy in a position where they're going to be obliterated, and Starfleet goes the other way and says, we're going to let them die.
Yeah.
Yep.
I could see why Captain Picard would be the one that's like, you can't do that. That's completely counter to everything that we stand for. Yeah. And I think the darkness of it, and a lot of times I'll get a little upset about darkness in Star Trek, but I think the difference between this and my problem with Star Trek Into Darkness, the movie, was it seemed very cynical all the way through. I never saw that glimmer of hope. It was just very dark and just like everything's awful.
Right.
The end. And and I felt like here you have Starfleet, yes, has gone down a path, but you still have that glimmer of hope, and that there's still, Picard is standing for the ideals of Starfleet. And so I think that's how you balance the hopefulness and the optimism of Star Trek with a darker type of storyline.
Yeah.
You still have this idealist who is standing up for what's right.
And I really, by the way, I so loved, again, spoiler alert, I love the reveal that she is Data's daughter. I was scared for a second she was going to be Picard's daughter or something like that. Yeah. And I was like, no, this thematically, I like this a lot, that it's like the child of a character you wouldn't expect to have a child, but B, his friend's child, and what that would, and that has a motivating factor for him. I think that's, in some ways, more powerful than like the kid you never knew, which is like a trope, obviously, that and Trek has done, you know?
Yeah. And aside from that, one thing, because obviously, like, how it's treated the lore and how it treated the characters we know was amazing. I would say, like, I had my doubts about Picard because, you know, we wasn't sure about how it was going to handle the character. The moment I knew I liked the series was in the beginning, when you had her with her boyfriend, and they've got all of this great banter, and I'm like, I can't wait to get to know both of these characters. They're both amazing. Her boyfriend is so incredibly charming. When he got killed, I was literally like, no. And we know he'd been on screen for what, like a minute, like 30 seconds. That's how I knew, like, the writing and the direction and choosing the actors and choosing someone who's so charismatic and really showing that bond where it's not just like, oh, they killed a dude off. It's like, no, we liked him, like, immediately.
Yeah, and then they're also kind of like the whole Data's daughter thing. The jury's out for me. Just that aspect of it, we'll see. But the idea, like, when they killed her, like, that's one of the only times I've been like, I'm just like, oh, it was a dream. Like, no,
it was not. They've already done some weird dream stuff. I don't think this is another dream. And I like that.
The idea of you set up this character and then, you know, you throw the audience for a loop there, but also, but still keep that thread alive. I just think is very, because I was like, what are they doing? It's like, okay, again, deep cut alert. I was like, wait a minute, was this all sort of a bait and switch where this is all in his head, and in the series finale of Star Trek: The Next Generation, they established that he potentially is doomed to suffer from this thing called McGregor syndrome. I think it is.
No, that's Batman and Robin.
That's Alfred in Batman and Robin. You're right.
That's Dr. Fitz's wife.
That's Alfred in Batman and Robin. It has escaped. For some reason, that syndrome popped in my head, and the one from Star Trek: The Next Generation popped out of my head. Anyway, a degenerative disease. Yeah. I'm like, oh, is this setting up the fact that perhaps he's starting to manifest? But there's lots of interesting threads, and I'm so on board to see, like, where does this go? Where is this leading? And maybe it's going to lead to somewhere that's kind of like, but it did what a pilot's supposed to do, which is, like, it set several threads that I'm like, I can't wait to tug on those threads and see what happens. Romulans excavating Borg technology, and so much, like, interesting stuff. Like, okay.
Yeah, that's me, and I'm in. All right, so we can go ahead.
I got to look it up now.
All right, so we're going to go ahead. That is the end of spoiler talk. So you guys know that we all do this thing when we're done with talking spoilers. while Dan's looking that up.
Sorry, it's going to drive me crazy and distract me for the whole show.
By the way, when they brought back McGregor syndrome on Arrow, I was like cheered. I was like, oh my God, you actually decided to be like
Irremotic syndrome.
There we go. That's not a spoiler. That was just something we were chatting about. All right, so y'all, thank you so much for, you like and you subscribe, you hit the bell, you support us in all of these different ways. We see your tweets, we see you, we see all of your comments, and we just want to thank you because that's the reason why we get to do any of this stuff. That's the reason why I get to wake up in the morning excited to go to work because I get to talk about Picard with my friends and with all of you, my friends. So thank y'all so much. We really appreciate it. We've got some other really cool stuff. Our Oscar pick show, I know that you guys have been asking for it. That is coming this weekend. Our Screen Junkies show, our Oscar picks. It's going to be really entertaining and really fun.
I will say that there were decisions made that have already been bearing fruit as far as people saying, like, you were right, and like, thank you.
Thank you. So that is happening. Never Surrender, our Galaxy Quest documentary is up now wherever you can buy all of your digital movies, so go check that out. And as we have been doing, we're going to spend the rest of January highlighting some links where you can donate to help out with the Australian wildfires. So please check the links in the description down below if you're looking for some places where you can help.
Yes. And also
please.
globally, I mean, we're not going to cover it, but also just something to. The government's very different there, so it's not the same. But this massive viral infection spreading throughout China. Last night, I was posting about it on Twitter. They've canceled all of the new releases for the Chinese New Year holiday weekend at the box office, which is a massive.
Wow.
I mean,
like
one of
four movies,
one of the
huge
biggest. Like we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. This is one of the biggest. It would be like if here in the U.S. they canceled all of the Christmas movies. Like they're like, oh, Star Wars and Jumanji and I was going to say Cats, but no one wants to see it. But like all of the big Christmas releases were all canceled. So obviously the Chinese government different than the wildfires in Australia. But again, just having a global eye toward health and safety, and just hopefully that they can work a way to get that under control as well. The world's fine. We're fine.
It's fine. No,
I'm going to ignore the fact
fires,
that the inciting incident in World War Z was a mysterious virus in China that spread to the rest of the world.
We're just going to go ahead and skidoo tough that. Yeah.
Not that it's a zombie virus, but it's like truth is stranger than fiction.
A little bit, very often. So next we're going to talk about the future, where happiness lies. So we'll see. Captain Marvel and the MCU's future. Captain Marvel 2 is officially headed our way, with the writer from WandaVision, Megan McDowell, taking over, and this is via THR. The movie also reportedly will be bringing in a new director while retaining original directors Anna Bolden and Ryan Fleck for a future MCU project, possibly Disney Plus series. So now that we know that team is going to be directing somewhere else, they're not going to be directing on this one, who do you think would be a good fit for Captain Marvel 2?
God, it's funny. I always want to say Michelle McLaren, although I think she's always she's toyed with directing some of these big movies and then decided not to, and she's stuck with TV for a reason.
These days, I always want to say Deborah Chow, but
Deborah Chow, Deborah Chow, I'm always trying to think, okay, well, she's too busy with. Yeah. So it's a hard one to decide whose schedule is free.
I mean, that character, for several reasons. Number one, because the first one took place in the past and is now in the current day, but also for many reasons, I think that character is a bit of a blank slate.
I agree.
So I think I would like to see a writer-director come in, a Ryan Coogler type model, or a James Gunn type model, where you have someone at the helm who's also involved with the creative of establishing what to do with this character, because obviously the first Captain Marvel movie was a $1 billion hit, but it was also largely a function of introducing the character. And then, she's in an end game, but again, sort of as a function of what she does in the plot.
What she does, not who she is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that now that we've gotten this thing of like the Amnesia storyline's kind of behind us, and the origin story is behind us, and her function in Endgame is behind us, it's no secret Captain Marvel, not one of my favorite Marvel films.
Same here.
So I don't know who I don't know exactly who to suggest specifically,
Right.
but I would like to see someone who is engaged not just as a director, but in a creative capacity to really flesh out her
I think I know they're looking for a female director, but I agree with you that like I think they want and need someone like a Taika type to really like shake it up. And it was interesting, this news, because when Scott Derrickson left Doctor Strange a couple weeks ago, a friend of mine pointed out to me, he goes, "Do you realize it's very strange that they haven't said anything about the Captain Marvel directors returning?" And I say they, I should say it hasn't even leaked out in the trades. And I was like, "You're right." It feels like they're going to replace them. Like it feels like, and I know they're saying that they'll still do other stuff in MCU, but it's still out. It just feels like, because I don't think, that movie to me was like, fine, but it wasn't really exciting. And I feel like they kind of know, but it was a $1 billion hit.
Right.
So they want to shake things up. Like they want to, they want big things for it going forward. So they know they have to bring in someone who can really liven things up.
Well, I also think it's a lot easier to do the sequel than because all of that baggage is out of the way with all of that stuff. It's already
was
done.
like a lot of like heavy mythology. And stuff,
and that was their job to kind of set everything up. And now someone gets the job of like, okay, well now let's go deeper into the friendships. Let's go deeper into the relationships.
Well, because it has to stand completely and totally on its own right now. You're not, as of this moment, none of these movies are serving a huge overarching storyline like you were seeing in a lot of the late Phase 3 Marvel films. It's not, you're not necessarily going to have that same curiosity factor of like, oh, I'm excited about this character, but also I want to know how this fits into blank. Like right now, there's no larger superstructure for it to fit into in general.
Or at least not one that we know that would get you psyched to be like,
right. So I think there's a little bit extra pressure as far as like these have to be good, not just as part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but these have to be good on their own. And I think Black Widow, how the response to that, both critically and commercially, is going to tell us a lot about what the audience thinks of the MCU now that Endgame is done, and what kind of path they're going to be blazing going forward.
Yeah, and this is all like there's been a bunch of stuff that's been happening with the MCU, which just kind of shows how complicated it is when you have so many moving parts. There is the Scott Derrickson leaving Doctor Strange, Falcon and Winter Soldier, their production because of the earthquakes in Puerto Rico, their production's been delayed. Where WandaVision has actually been moved up. It was supposed to be in 2021. Now it's going to be coming out this year. Hawkeye series is reportedly delayed. We'll see what happens with that. And then obviously, what's up?
Marvel has denied those.
Marvel has denied those reports.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
It's just weird. We haven't heard anything like we're hearing She-Hulk's going to film soon, but nothing about Hawkeye yet.
Right, and then we've got the Marvel Studios and Sony partnership, and then all the stuff happening with James Gunn and everything. Do we feel like this is a rocky start, or is it just showing how difficult balancing all of these things is?
I think it's like it's a weird time. Like Dan was saying, it's like because now it's like now they finished the Infinity Saga. I feel like and I say it's all relative. Like I've said this before, I think, but it's like they've peaked. That doesn't mean now it's all going to be bombs. It means like you can't have a year like they had last year again. You can't have $3 billion hits, one of which was the biggest hit ever. And so I think people, expectations, I think it's going to inevitably happen, even though people don't think back that, like, just a couple years ago, Thor Ragnarok was not making $1 billion. It's like all their movies were not automatically making $1 billion, and that'll happen again, and we'll see this year what happens. But I don't think it's necessarily, it's going to be a rocky time for them, I think, just because, of course, they're probably looking at all and being like, we need to put all of our best foot forward and all these things. Some of it, though, people forget the past. So it's like when something like the Derrickson thing happens, as much as it was surprising, it's like, hey, look what happened with Edgar Wright.
Exactly.
It's like, look, even, Thor the Dark World, and there were other movies that had a lot of problems. It's just that MCU in totality is a success. It's also a major movie studio now producing multiple, like up to 4 movies and now multiple TV series a year. They're all not going to run smoothly. They can't.
Right.
And I think they're doing more than ever right now. That sometimes I do have concern about that, about like, wow, they're doing like the fact that in 2021, I think we get like 4 movies and 3 TV shows or something like that. It's like, oh, I hope they can handle amping up to that degree. But at the same time, I'm not like they're going to fail, because they've proven over and over again they might have some bumps in the road. They might have a Thor the Dark World, both which was trouble behind the scenes and wasn't a great movie. But then you look at everything they're doing around that. Thor the Dark World was followed up by Guardians and Winter Soldier. So, it's like, it won't all be perfect. They won't all be slam dunks. But I think that makes sense at the size they are now.
Yeah.
For me, my only, and this is always my hesitation, it's just I just want the movies to be good, man. I'm not worried about your metrics. I'm not worried about, I know that they are, because that's their whole thing, is worrying about how the money works.
Right.
I just want good movies, and whatever it takes to get a good movie, then that's what it's got to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like the sophomore, we talk a lot about, and I know it sounds weird when we talk about a franchise that's been around for 12 years. This year will be 12 years.
Having
but
a sophomore slump? Yeah.
Well, not even the sophomore slump, but the idea of when you have a filmmaker who breaks out with their first huge hit, a lot of times that hit did not have a lot of oversight because they're an unknown quantity, and so the wheels were set in motion for what they just accomplished many years ago. And I think that there was probably some meddling, quote unquote, but a lot of it was just listen, we know where we're going.
Right.
Mm-hmm. We have these things set in motion, so we've got it. Here now, you're rebuilding almost from the ground up, and I think there's going to be a lot more people weighing in about, no, you should do this, no, you should do this, no, you should do this, no, do this, no, do this. You can sometimes they can make things better, sometimes not so much. Yeah. So for me, the jury is very much out. You cannot take away the accomplishment of what they've done. I mean, it's a stunning accomplishment, but you built the brand. Now you have to maintain it. That's almost harder than building it because now you have the expectation.
Right.
Which is very difficult.
Yeah, and it's funny, you mentioning when it began and everything. It's in successes and failures in Hollywood, especially with these big projects, can sound so similar behind the scenes. It's like Iron Man 1, everyone involved will tell you they were rewriting it on the set all the time. And it's when something bombs, we go, oh, they were rewriting it on the set all the time. When Iron Man's a huge, well-received hit, it's they were rewriting it on the set all the time, and look what they did.
Yeah, when there's an Iron Man and it works, but then when there's a mummy and it doesn't work, that's different.
Yeah.
All right, Dan.
Yes.
How would Kevin Feige navigate talking about all this to the press?
So what would the question be exactly?
Kevin, it seems like you're dealing with a couple of bumps in the road here. Do you think you have it all taken care of, or do you think this series is starting a little rocky?
Well, here's the great thing about the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Marvel Universe in general. There is a great volume of characters, a lot of great characters that we have not yet told stories about, and a lot of stories left to be told about the characters that we have. And so I'm confident in our ability to establish a stable of filmmakers, and there are a lot of things that we've yet to do that we're very excited about, and we're very committed also to maintaining what we have already that we've built over the past 12 years.
Oh my God, you just broke my brain. You sound like every boss I've ever had. Yeah. It's amazing. Thank you, Dan.
How to reassure someone by saying nothing. Sure. It's an art that Kevin Feige has mastered.
Oh man, talking about saying a bunch of nothing. We're going to get into these Netflix metrics. This is via The Verge. Some other outlets have been covering it as well. Netflix's Q4 earnings report came in, and The Witcher is the most watched show of all time on the streaming service.
So they say.
So they say. Oh, we're getting into that. That is according to Netflix's newly unveiled definition of watched, where it changed watch 70% of a single episode of a series to just anyone who clicks on it and hangs out for a couple minutes.
Literally.
Anyone who chose to watch and did watch at least 2 minutes. That's it.
That's not a watch.
Remember Facebook, guys?
Oh, boy, do I.
Don't we remember Facebook when they started messing around with their metrics and using it to do other things? So how do we feel about the shift in watch metrics and how much more gray this is getting?
It's always been ridiculous. I say ridiculous. It's just been a thing that they don't release their numbers, and that when they do, they can just very selectively say, this was our most viewed thing. This was the biggest hit, but we have no comparison. Yeah. We have no idea. They release so much every year, so we have no idea what the apples to oranges is. When they cancel something, well, what did that get versus the things you didn't cancel? So it's obviously, this is such a ridiculous way to say that if you watched 2 minutes, if you watched 2 episodes, that'd be way better. If you watch 2 minutes of a show, we count you as a viewer. And also, even their terminology, they say, chose to watch. They don't know that. I mean, as we all have had happen, something auto plays for a couple minutes.
They may be able to break down.
They put the cursor on it, so that means that they chose to watch it.
I guess they could say if you clicked on it. But again, 2 minutes, especially because Netflix has so much, I'm sure literally, The Witcher is a good example. As much as there are people going hey, there's a Witcher show, awesome. There's people going, oh, look at that long-haired dude, or Henry Cavill, click, not for me, click out. Mm-hmm. And they're like, that's a viewer. That is a very shaky way of saying you had a viewer.
Well, and the only time they ever talk about any of this stuff is when they're like, hey, we had a huge hit,
we did great.
And we never hear about metrics any other time. It'll be like Stranger Things is killing it, Witcher is killing it, skadoots. And that's all. They never talk about it otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, every time we break down these numbers on the show, they're mostly meaningless to me, largely because of the context and the fact that they select which ones to share, and they're obviously not going to share anything bad. So they've now gone from mostly meaningless to completely meaningless, as far as I'm concerned, in the sense of like that doesn't. To me, it seems like they need to keep pace and maintain pace in this competitive marketplace, and this will allow them to say that everything they release was enormously successful.
Yeah.
So when everything, it's like a syndrome. When everything is successful, nothing is.
And because they put out so much content now, there's like literally weeks where you can read like 12 new Netflix shows that you've probably heard of maybe one of them. And so it's like, we just have no idea.
I haven't even watched The Circle yet.
We have no idea like what their base level is, what is like the average viewership for one of these shows. And even the way there was a really fascinating article, and it's about 3 years ago now, I can't remember, maybe Vanity Fair, but it was talking about even how the little image you see for a show, they have like a dozen different choices, and so what you might see for The Witcher is different than what I might see. They might choose to have like a female character for some people and Henry Gill for another, and the villain for someone else. So even to like draw people in, they use all these different imagery.
That's weird. I don't like it.
It is weird. Yeah. That's why sometimes you'll be like, why are they choosing like the fifth like random lead on this show? It's like, oh, you got that cycle on the algorithm. So even that's like going to affect if someone clicks for like 2 minutes, because it might draw you in under false pretenses, right?
Why is there this lady wrestler used for The Witcher? I don't know.
No, exactly, right? And then that you might watch it for 2 minutes and go, no lady wrestlers here.
Yeah.
So they have their own ecosystem, but it's all top secret, and they don't tell anyone. They don't tell their showrunners or anyone, the viewers. So it just it just feels very silly now when they tout these numbers, because it's just so
means nothing.
It's just, we're saying stuff.
Speaking of top secret, boom!
Ooh.
Y'all, it's time.
Ooh.
Because of all of your likes, because of all of your love, we have got us, oh baby boys and girls and thems, we have got us a movie fight bonus round.
Ooh.
I am so excited about this, so let's get ready to movie fight.
It's time for Screen Junkies Movie Fights.
I know, right? Hoot. Nope, I don't have it. I don't have it. There's a certain hoot, and I ain't got that hoot. All right, so Eric and Dan are two Trek heavyweights, and so we are asking a heavyweight question. Don't discount your knowledge. I've heard you talk. What is the best Star Trek movie? Now, since for many people there is an obvious answer, to keep things fair, we're making this a blind fight!
Oh,
I got
crap.
it. Go ahead and pick.
So I'm fighting, whatever this is, I'm fighting it as the best Trek
Whatever
movie.
it is, you're fighting that it's the best Trek
Please don't
movie.
be insurrection. Please don't be insurrection. Please don't be insurrection.
Me as well. Oh my gosh.
Alrighty. And Eric, whenever you are ready, you can go ahead and start your opening argument.
Star Trek Into Darkness. We have this great cast from Star Trek 2009. Really great group that work off each other. What do we like more than seeing them again? Back together. Star Trek did we got the very end, we got Kirk and Spock established, like finally they were fighting that whole first movie. Into Darkness, we get to see them actually as buddies. We get to see this connection that is formed between them, how much they mean to each other, and understand, for a new audience, for a new, dare I say it, a new generation of viewers, why this is an important dynamic and how they will do anything for each other, fight to save each other. At the same time, we see these great threats coming, and we get one of the greatest villains in Star Trek history impeccably brought back by Benedict Cumberbatch.
Sell me, baby.
Excellent actor, get Benedict Cumberbatch as Khan. What more could you possibly want than Star Trek Into Darkness? I ask you.
All right, thank you very much for your opening thoughts, Eric. Now we're going to take it over to Dan. Give me your first thoughts.
Let me tell you why Star Trek Insurrection is the best.
I still think you won.
We were just talking about in the Picard thing about one of the great things about Star Trek is it's about idealism, and that's what Star Trek Insurrection is about. It's actually about Captain Picard standing up to Starfleet. There is a race of people on this planet who there's a resource that they have, and Starfleet just wants to, let's just get him out of there. And he's saying, no, that's not right. It's at the core of everything that Star Trek is about, which is always standing up for what's right. So you have like the philosophical debate of Star Trek. You've got action. There's a lot of action sequences in the film. So you've got the action of a Star Trek film. F. Murray Abraham, great villain. Always good to see him in a villain role. Star Trek Into Darkness is a second-rate remake of a much better Trek film. It does a shortcut to a friendship. Like Wrath of Khan was the payoff to almost 20 years of storytelling, and Star Trek Into Darkness tried to do it in 2 hours. You can't do it that way. Triple blood and bringing people back from super blood, and there wasn't even
All right, well, let's go ahead and fight that out.
It's John Harrison.
You say they're just copying. I say homage, and you take and there are some big losses in Star Trek Into Darkness, and I think some of them really hit home. Bruce Greenwood was so great in the first one as Pike, and I think was kind of instrumental in taking Pike as sort of this mythical character in Trek mythos, but really building him more to be like, oh, this is a really likable character. So you definitely feel it when we lose him in this movie after him and Kirk formed their bond in the first one. And then we just get to see what this crew really is like. Because the first one was an origin story, we get to really see in Into Darkness, this is how they function and the dynamic between them and how great it is to really see how they bounce off each other. And then, yeah, with Khan in the final act, I mean, there is some very intense stuff that happens action-wise. I think that, big action in this movie, some obviously huge effects, ILM doing in this film, but also that you get that intensity of, yes, the relationship between Kirk and Spock has been shorter, but I still think we saw what brought them together in that first movie, and that why it would affect them so deeply to lose one of them, for both of them. By flipping it, we see this dynamic that it is very equal, and how much that loss would hit.
I mean, I agree that Admiral Pike, I liked what they did with him in the first movie, and then they kill him, and then like 30 seconds later, Captain Kirk's throwing a phaser at a shuttlecraft engine. His death is like literally lingered on for like maybe 20 seconds. And then you have to go to the next action sequence, and the next action sequence, and the next action sequence. The stupid like that makes no sense except for them doing a needless reference to an earlier film. I think that not only does Star Trek Into Darkness not stand alone outside of having seen the first film, I don't think it stands alone out of having seen The Wrath of Khan or the original series or knowing who Leonard Nimoy and William Shatner were. It was coasting so much on the back of much better work done by other movies and other films and the TV show, whereas Star Trek Insurrection, if you take it outside of the Enterprise or the show Next Generation, and it's just a standalone film about the Enterprise and the Enterprise crew, it stands up because it has a compelling story. It's still about this moral dilemma, which is a very universal story. It does not wrapped up in references to things that happened on a TV show 40 years previously. That's the worst thing about Star Trek Into Darkness is, for Star Trek fans, it's just a rehash of a much better story. And then if you're just going for an action thing, it's a very generic action movie, the same 3rd/4th act conflict on a moving vehicle that you've seen in a lot of other action films, and the same big loud destruction. There's nothing special. There's nothing unique about it for either of the groups that it's aiming for.
Can't have conflict without Khan, Dan. That's all I'll say. Also, as far as Kirk's reaction, Kirk is a man of passion and a man of action. So yes, he doesn't linger on the death of Pike as far as like emotionally on external, but we're going to see that later as far as what happens with him and Spock, even though they flip things there. But I still think you see what it means to him, the loss. Also, Leonard Nimoy appearing in this film, which was a really nice surprise that they kept. We get a final performance here from Leonard Nimoy as Spock, which gets to both touch upon his history at the films, but also get to see that he is still a connective tissue for these characters. I really like the dynamic between the new Spock, played by Quinto, and the original Spock, and to see that mentorship still continues. I feel like you really get to see the relationships evolve in this film because the first one was so setting it up, and it was obviously leading towards them becoming the crew. Here you see this is how we actually work together, why they work so well together, and why they all complement each other so well.
I'm glad you brought up Leonard Nimoy, because the Star Trek 09 gave him such a wonderful, beautiful send-off of him like wistfully as the new Enterprise is launching, saying, thrusters on full, doing the, space the final frontier, a handing of the baton to the new crew. And then what do they do in this movie? They're like, oh, we're in trouble. call Spock, and then they just FaceTime Spock. Like, no, that you gave him a wonderful farewell, and then you just bring him back on a video screen that you could probably shoot at his house on his lunch hour or whatever when he brought Leonard Nimoy in. It completely ruined the impact of the goodbye that they did to him in the previous film in Star Trek 09. And again, like even going down to the sacrifice of like, you know, like what can we, we're gonna do the end of Wrath of Khan, but this time it's Kirk that dies, but he doesn't really die because they didn't even have the balls to keep him dead. Like if they would have actually killed Captain Kirk and then you have a new crew led by Spock, that's an interesting direction. They're like, no, Kirk has to go kick the engine. Just go kick the engine, Captain Kirk, and he dies kicking the engine. Man of action. And then dies for like 15 minutes, and then you bring on Carl Urban to mutter something about a super blood. Oh, hobgoblin of super blood tribbles. It's such a pale imitation. Whereas, yes, I know Insurrection gets a little bit of feedback or a little bit of criticism about being a little snoozy, you know, but it is at its core what Star Trek is all about. If you want to see what the values of Star Trek are, I will. Yes, the final thoughts. If you want to see what the values of Star Trek are and to show people what this franchise can be, that's Star Trek Insurrection, because you have everything. You've got the action element. It does end with a big action set piece, and there are explosions, but couched inside of that is an actual debate about should we exploit this group of people because we need what they have, or should they be afforded rights? Like, that is a classic Star Trek and a classic human argument, whereas Star Trek Into Darkness is a big empty action spectacle that Khan is brought in as a name. When he says my name is Khan, that doesn't mean anything to Captain Kirk or Spock or the viewers. It's just them trying to cheaply remake a much better film. And for me, and this isn't kayfabe here, it is the worst of the Star Trek films because it doesn't bring anything new to the table. All it tries to do is imitate what Wrath of Khan did much better, and at the same time, because it is so cynical, betrays what I think are the core values of Star Trek in the process. I'll take Insurrection over Into Darkness any day, and I'd say that under any circumstance.
All right, Eric, final thoughts?
Kayfabe, I wouldn't do it that far, but I'll say that Star Trek Into Darkness, look, is the entire sort of this new trilogy sort of Star Trek on steroids? I think yes. Like obviously it was aimed at a modern audience that were both classic Trek fans but modern fans too. So it went bigger on the action, it went bigger on the spectacle perhaps than we're used to. But I think that what really nailed was that core dynamic of the characters, the people that we're really connected to. And Into Darkness gets to really flesh that out even more, to show what they are like, both as a community but the personal friendships within them, and to show that push them all the way to test their limits, and to see that yes, of course, Star Trek on steroids, they brought him back immediately as opposed to waiting one movie like the last one did to do the resurrection. But at the same time, I think it still sells you on the core element of like these two guys, and that's a reflection of the entire crew, I think. But of course, Kirk and Spock are central characters here. They will not just go to bat for each other; they will go as far as they possibly can to help each other, and as it turns out, to save each other here. And we get to see that as they are tested so darkly after their first big mission together.
All right, thank you so much. It is really hard to keep a straight face when you're doing these judgings, by the way, because I'm so used to like connecting and like, yeah, let's have this conversation. I'm like, blank face Radford.
You're talking about two terrible movies.
One terrible movie.
All right, so I guess it's up to me to do the judging, as everyone knows is my favorite part of this. So both, again, really great arguments for very, very terrible movies. Joe, great job. I loved how much you talked about the relationship between them and how important that was. But unfortunately, I just didn't hear. I heard a lot of defending Into Darkness. I didn't hear a lot about the difference between that and Insurrection.
It's as if I only saw the movie once and don't remember any of the plot because it's not very memorable.
It is kind of like that. And so because of that, because you were able to, you did parrying very well, but you weren't very good at the sticking part. I don't know what that's called. You weren't very good at thrusters. So because of that, I am giving this movie fights to Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan.
I won't argue that.
The viewers at home will be happy to know that I won't be here tomorrow, so that means I won't win tomorrow.
So thank you all so much for coming and hanging out. Don't forget, we've got the Honest Trailer up for Joker and Honest Trailer commentaries, a bunch of really fun stuff. Go check those out. And you can follow us on Twitter at ScreenJunkiesU. And thank you all so much, and we will see you back here tomorrow. Bye.
Engage.